Alexandria had been staring at the same email for 20 minutes, her hands trembling slightly as she read the latest round of death threats. Her campaign staff thought she was reviewing donor lists, but she was actually fighting back tears when someone quietly placed a guitar in her hands. The Bronx campaign office buzzed with the kind of energy that only comes at 11 p.m. during an election season. Pizza boxes stacked high on makeshift tables, coffee cups scattered across every surface, and the soft glow of laptop screens illuminating young faces determined to change the world. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat at her desk in the corner, supposedly reviewing the day's fundraising numbers, but her eyes hadn't moved from her phone screen in nearly half an hour. The message was one of dozens that had come through her personal social media that day. This one was different, though, more specific, more detailed about what someone wanted to do to her. At 29, she was used to criticism, used to being called naive or inexperienced, but the violent threats still made her stomach clench with fear. She'd learned not to show it, learned to smile and wave and give fiery speeches about fighting for the people, but here in the quiet moments between public appearances, the weight of it all pressed down on her chest like a stone. Maria, her campaign manager and closest friend since college, noticed Alexandria's stillness first. They'd been working together for months now, and Maria could read her moods like weather patterns. Tonight felt different, heavier somehow. The usual quick wit and rapid-fire commentary had been replaced by long silences and distant stares. "Hey," Maria said softly, approaching Alexandria's desk with 2 cups of coffee. "You've been staring at that screen for a while. Everything okay?" Alexandria quickly locked her phone and forced a smile, the same practiced expression she'd perfected for hostile interviews and skeptical voters. "Just tired," she said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Long day, you know how it is." But Maria knew better. She'd seen Alexandria power through exhaustion, seen her debate policy while running on 3 hours of sleep and pure determination. This wasn't tiredness. This was something deeper, something Alexandria was trying to hide. The office had grown quieter as the night wore on. Most of the volunteers had gone home, leaving only the core team of 8 staffers who'd been with Alexandria since the beginning. They were young, idealistic, and absolutely devoted to their candidate, but they were also observant enough to notice when their fearless leader wasn't quite herself. Carlos, the communications director who'd left a corporate job to join the campaign, looked up from his laptop where he'd been crafting social media responses to the day's attacks. "Alex, you sure you're good? You've barely said a word in the last hour." She glanced around the room at the faces looking back at her with genuine concern. These weren't just staffers or political operatives, they were friends, believers who'd followed her into what everyone said was an impossible race against a 10-term incumbent. They deserved better than the fake smile she was giving them. "I'm fine, really," she insisted, but her voice lacked its usual conviction, just processing some feedback from today's events. Sam, the youngest member of the team at just 22, set down his phone and studied Alexandria's face. He'd grown up in the same Bronx neighborhood where she'd tended bar, and he had a particular talent for reading people. "Feedback or death threats?" he asked quietly. The directness of his question caught Alexandria off guard. She'd been so careful to keep that part of her experience separate from the team, not wanting to burden them with the darker realities of her public profile. But Sam's matter-of-fact tone told her he already knew, that maybe they all knew and had been waiting for her to acknowledge it. "How did you?" she started, then stopped herself. Of course they knew. They managed her social media, fielded her calls, screened her mail. They probably saw more of the vitriol than she did. "We see the comments, Alex," Maria said gently. "We know what people are saying about you, what they're threatening. You don't have to carry that alone." Alexandria felt her carefully constructed composure begin to crack. These people had given up stable jobs, worked 80-hour weeks for practically no pay, all because they believed in what she represented. And here she was, falling apart over the very thing they'd all signed up to face together. "It's getting worse," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The threats, the harassment. Sometimes I read them and I wonder what I've gotten myself into, what I've gotten all of you into." The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic on the street below. Everyone had stopped what they were doing, their attention focused entirely on Alexandria as she spoke. "I knew it would be hard," she continued, the words coming easier now that she'd started. "I knew they'd come after me for being young, for being Latina, for being a woman who dared to think she could change things. But reading about what someone wants to do to you, seeing your face photoshopped onto horrible images," she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Lisa, the policy director who'd taken a leave of absence from law school to join the campaign, moved to sit on the edge of Alexandria's desk. "You know what I think about when I read that stuff?" she said. "I think about how scared they must be of you. They're not sending death threats to politicians they think are irrelevant. That's supposed to make me feel better? Alexandria asked with a weak laugh. It should, Carlos chimed in, because it means we're winning. Not in the polls necessarily, but in here, he pointed to his chest. We're winning hearts and minds, and that scares the hell out of people who profit from keeping things exactly as they are. Alexandria looked around the room at these remarkable young people who'd chosen to stand with her when everyone else said she didn't have a chance. They could have taken safe jobs, worked for established politicians with guaranteed victories, but instead they'd chosen the long shot, the bartender from the Bronx who thought Congress needed more working-class voices. I wrote something, she said suddenly, the words surprising even her. A few weeks ago, after a particularly bad day online, I couldn't sleep, and I just wrote. It's not very good, but it helped me process some of this stuff. What kind of something? Sam asked, his curiosity genuine. A song, actually, Alexandria said, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. I know it sounds silly, but I used to write songs in college when I was stressed. It was therapy, I guess. Maria's eyes lit up. You never told me you wrote songs. Because it's embarrassing, Alexandria laughed. I'm not a musician. I just play around with words and melodies sometimes. Do you remember it? Lisa asked eagerly. Alexandria hesitated. She'd never shared her writing with anyone, never performed anything she'd written outside of her own apartment. The song she'd written was deeply personal, raw in a way that felt dangerous to expose. I don't know, she said. It's pretty personal stuff, not exactly campaign material. We're not asking for campaign material, Carlos said. We're asking for you. The real you, not the candidate version. The honesty in his voice made something shift in Alexandria's chest. These people had seen her at her worst, sleep-deprived, stressed, sometimes snapping at them when the pressure got too high, and they were still here. Maybe she could trust them with this too. There's a guitar in the supply closet, Sam offered hopefully, left over from that volunteer appreciation party we had in here last month. Before Alexandria could object, Sam was already retrieving the instrument, an old acoustic guitar that looked like it had seen better days but was still serviceable. He set it carefully beside her chair and stepped back with an encouraging smile. You don't have to, Maria said, sensing Alexandria's hesitation. But if you want to, we'd love to hear it. Alexandria stared at the guitar for a long moment, her mind racing. Every instinct told her to deflect, to crack a joke and change the subject back to poll numbers or messaging strategy. But the weight of carrying everything alone had become unbearable, and maybe, just maybe, sharing this one piece of herself might lighten the load. If I do this, she said slowly, it stays in this room. No recording, no social media, no anything. This is just us. The team nodded solemnly, understanding the significance of what she was offering. Alexandria picked up the guitar and tested the tuning, her fingers finding the familiar chord progressions that had been her companions through college stress and post-graduation uncertainty. It's called More Than the Fight, she said, her voice steady but quiet. And it's about remembering why we do this work, even when it feels like the whole world wants you to fail. She began to play, her fingers moving with more confidence than her voice as she started to sing. The melody was simple, the kind of tune that stayed with you after hearing it once, and her voice, though untrained, carried the emotional weight of every word. They see the anger, they see the fight, they see a young girl burning bright, but they don't see the quiet tears, the weight I carry, all these fears. The room fell completely silent as Alexandria's voice filled the space, transforming the cluttered campaign office into something intimate and sacred. Her usual public speaking confidence had been replaced by something more vulnerable, more human. I'm more than the fight, more than the rage, more than headlines on the page. I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, I'm a hope that won't bend. The chorus hit with an emotional force that surprised even Alexandria. She'd written the words weeks ago in her apartment, tears streaming down her face as she processed another day of harassment and attacks. But singing them now, surrounded by people who believed in her mission as much as she did, the words felt less like a cry for help and more like a declaration of strength. They can threaten, they can hate, they can try to seal my fate, but I'll keep fighting for what's right, 'cause I'm more than this fight. As the song continued, Alexandria felt the tension that had been building in her shoulders for weeks begin to release. Each verse was a piece of her story. The girl who'd grown up watching her parents struggle to pay bills, the college student who'd majored in economics because she wanted to understand why the system seemed rigged, the bartender who'd listened to customers vent about politics while dreaming of making real change. Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough to handle all this bitter stuff, but then I think of why I'm here, for every voice they've tried to silence, every tear. The bridge of the song was the most personal part, referencing not just her own struggles but the people who'd inspired her to run in the first place. The single mothers in her district juggling multiple jobs, the immigrants afraid to seek help when they needed it, the young people drowning in student debt who'd been told they didn't matter. When she finished the final chorus, the silence that followed was profound. Alexandria set the guitar down carefully and looked up to find several of her staffers wiping tears from their eyes. Maria was the first to speak, her voice thick with emotion. "Alex," she said, "that was beautiful, and it was exactly what we needed to hear." "Why?" Alexandria asked, genuinely curious. "Because it reminded us that you're human," Carlos said. "We've been so focused on the campaign, on winning, on proving everyone wrong, that sometimes we forget you're dealing with stuff we can't even imagine." Sam nodded enthusiastically. "And because it reminded us why we're here, not just to win an election, but to give people like us a voice in government." Lisa leaned forward in her chair. "You should know that seeing you struggle and keep going anyway doesn't make you seem weak, it makes you seem real. And real is what people are hungry for right now." Alexandria felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I'm supposed to be the leader here. I'm supposed to have it all figured out." "Says who?" Maria challenged. "You're 29 years old running for Congress in one of the biggest political upsets in recent history. You're allowed to be scared sometimes. You're allowed to doubt yourself. That's what makes you relatable." The conversation that followed went deep into the night, touching on fears and hopes and the weight of trying to represent not just a district but a generation. Alexandria learned that Sam had been getting harassment too, simply for working on her campaign. Lisa talked about the pressure she felt as one of the few women of color in her law school program. Carlos opened up about leaving his comfortable corporate job to work for minimum wage because he believed change was possible. By the time they finally packed up to go home, something fundamental had shifted in the dynamic of the team. The artificial barrier between candidate and staff had dissolved, replaced by something more honest and sustainable. They were still a campaign, still fighting an uphill battle against enormous odds, but now they were fighting it together, as real people with real fears and real hopes. Alexandria's song became an unofficial anthem for the team in the weeks that followed. Not performed again, but referenced in moments when the criticism got particularly harsh or the polls looked discouraging. "Remember," Maria would say during particularly difficult strategy sessions, "we're more than this fight." The phrase appeared on a handmade sign in the office, written in Sam's messy handwriting and tacked to the wall above Alexandria's desk. It became their shorthand for staying grounded, for remembering the human element behind the political strategy. Alexandria never performed the song publicly, never even played it again for anyone outside that core group of 8. But the effect it had on her team, and on her own sense of purpose, lasted throughout the campaign and beyond. It reminded her that vulnerability could be a strength, that leadership didn't require perfection, and that the people fighting alongside her needed to see her humanity in order to maintain their own. Years later, when Alexandria had won her seat and established herself as a powerful voice in Congress, she would still think about that night in the campaign office. The moment when she chose honesty over image, connection over control. It had been a turning point not just in her campaign, but in her understanding of what authentic leadership could look like. The song itself remained their secret, a piece of shared history that bonded the original team together long after the campaign ended. Some of them went on to work in her congressional office, others moved to different campaigns or causes, but they all carried that moment with them, the night their candidate became their friend, and their fight became something bigger than politics. In a world where political leaders were expected to be superhuman, Alexandria had chosen to be simply human, and in that choice, she'd discovered that real strength didn't come from hiding your struggles, but from sharing them with people who chose to stand with you anyway. The guitar remained in the campaign office until the day after the election, when Alexandria finally won the race everyone said was impossible. As they packed up the space that had been their second home for months, Sam carefully placed the instrument in its case and handed it to her. "For the next time you need to remember who you are," he said with a smile. Alexandria accepted the guitar gratefully, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead in Washington, she would face them with the same honesty and vulnerability that had carried her this far. Because she had learned something invaluable in that dimly lit campaign office surrounded by young idealists who believed in change, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be real. And that lesson would serve her well in the battles to come.